So just give me a second and we'll get started with our webinar. So a very warm welcome all the attendees today in this session. Today is our webinar number 18 of the India Smart Protein Innovation Challenge 2021 as part of our Inspiration webinar series, where in phase 3 currently we have almost 150 candidates, which constitute almost 55 teams who are working on different problem statements and different pain points and different RFPs in the smart protein sector. So plant-based meat, eggs, and dairy, fermentation-derived meat, eggs, and dairy, seafood, and cultivated meat, eggs, and dairy, and allied solutions and technological processes within those value chain areas for the 3 key pillars of the smart protein sector. So today we are very, very glad to have with us Dennis, who's the senior research chef at Nourish Ventures, which is also a Griffith Foods worldwide. And we have Mr. Prakash, who's the director R&D at Griffith Foods, and he's looking after India and Middle East. We will also be joined by our third speaker for today, Mr. Benjamin Pippin, who's the channel director for Big Idea Ventures based out of Singapore. And I think both of our speakers, so Dennis has a unique background in food technology and also culinary application, and he's previously worked with multinationals as well. So we are really, really excited to have our speakers who are going to share their insights with our cohort. And just to tell you a little bit more about our speakers today. So Dennis has previously worked with Unilever, Givaudan, and Griffith Laboratories, and has an experience in product formulation, functional ingredients for flavor and texture profiles for culinary concepts and development of those concepts, prototyping, taking products to commercialization, just the overall flow from conceptualization to, I think, taking things to market, plant trials, scale up is what his background and expertise is. And we also have Om, who has more than almost 20 years of experience in the food technology area. He's previously worked with Kerry, Wrigley's, Kevin Care, and currently working obviously with Griffith Foods. We'll also be joined by Benjamin, who previously has worked with culinary applications. He's a chef and specifically now focusing on alternative proteins and also helping Big Idea Ventures and startups in their portfolio with business development and strategy. So quite excited with our panel today. And at the same time, just a couple of quick announcements on the challenge front. So all of this is obviously possible because of our sponsors and partners on the India Smart Protein Innovation Challenge, who have enabled all of this material to be open access and available for almost 750 candidates who started the journey with us 3 months ago. So a big thank you to all our sponsors and partners, and please make sure that you've completed your entry for the Smart Protein Solution Wall so that we can share your ideas in external facing format with all our stakeholders in industry, in our larger, smart protein ecosystem in India and globally as well. Make sure you've submitted your entries by 15th of Jan, which is the deadline. And tomorrow we have office hours sessions, which is primarily focused on plant-based, cultivated and fermentation sci-tech areas, and all your scientific questions that you're working on, whether you're working in track 1 or track 2. I'm sure you have a lot of questions, and this is your opportunity to talk with all of these experts one-on-one in breakout rooms and get your questions answered in a virtual office hours kind of a format. So make sure you've submitted the Google form, which has been sent to you a few times now on email. And also, obviously, we have a session on Saturday as well. So make sure if you have any questions, you've submitted those through the Zoom form, and other sessions will follow. Check all the resources sent on email. And without further ado, I'll stop sharing my screen and welcome Dennis on to share his thoughts, tell us a little bit about himself, and then get into his presentation for the day.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dennis. Thank you for introductions, Shardul. Very good introduction. I don't have to say too much more about myself. I just wanted to add that for the last 3 years, I did pretty much 90% of my work was helping out companies launch, commercialize and launch in the market different kind of plant-based meats. And that includes products for food service and retail as well. Today, in my small presentation, I will actually talk about what we were able to help these companies with and what kind of solution we've been able to deliver. We also are going to touch on some specifics for the Indian market when it as it relates to plant-based meats. It looks like the global plant-based market is projected to grow. We see different numbers, but this is not the point of this discussion. We know that the market is growing. There's a consumer interest, and there's a great market drive towards plant-based meats. Plant-based foods is nothing new, nothing special for India. However, it is rather the plant-based meats is a rather new category for the Indian market, according to the researches that we have available. It looks like I have the Indian portion of the presentation opened up right now. I wanted to start by going through basic slides that my colleagues, Pratima and Om, who are also on this session, they put together to kind of talk about what kind of challenges we face as players in this market, and what kind of solutions we've been able to provide in the last several years working on launching these products. It seems like a lot of consumers are willing and kind of interested in meat substitutes. In this market, currently, this is an interesting kind of category. As you go around the globe, some markets are mature, where meat substitutes are actually starting to compete with traditional meat, and some markets are just entering this. And the different types of products are at the different maturity levels in these markets. For example, a ground sort of chopped and formed things like burgers, nuggets, and all kinds of traditional Western formats in America is kind of a matured market where a lot of companies compete for the place under the sun. And in Germany, for example, a lot of sliceable alternatives to a bologna, pepperoni, salamis, all kinds of products like that is a matured market. Yet in America, this is underrepresented segment and projected to grow. So it's all interesting how this plays out. In India, it seems like it's projected to grow almost at 9%, which is the great news, and the market is huge. I saw the numbers that it's close to the $50 million a market, and it's projected to grow really fast. What's driving this trend? As we see, there's understanding that we need to eat healthier. So there's a huge drive worldwide to deliver the protein intake that is set for adults, and it's actually not achieved by a lot of markets as of right now. For India, for example, we see the numbers that tell us that about 80% of people are unaware of their that they're protein deficient, and 93% absolutely unaware of their protein intake, daily protein intake. This thing changed quite a bit in the US, for example, where protein content of the food and protein intake is coming up as number one, or one of the leading considerations for people's diets. People searching out better sources of protein, the healthier choices. They don't want to trade the protein intake for the other health aspects of the foods. We see that a lot of consumers looking forward to this meat substitutes. However, there's a very good trend that tells us that the new products need to either match or get close in several parameters to the traditional meat offerings. One is the protein level, the delivery of the protein, the quality protein is number two. The price and availability is another very important consideration. We can talk about animal welfare. A lot of countries, a lot of markets, this is one of the driving trends that kind of drives this understanding that eating healthy is good, but eating responsibly is even better. I'm not going to spend much time on this because I think this is pretty much already an established trend, and we understand that. Talking about flexitarians, it's an interesting topic. It came up really a lot in our work in the US market, and a little bit less in worldwide, talking about who these are. The flexitarians, at least the way we understand it in the US, is a part of the population that still consumes meat products, but try to kind of have their large portion of their protein intake from a plant-based products. So it's the population. It's a segment that will trade current traditional meat offerings in either food service or at home through the retail outlets. They will trade it for plant-based, but they don't want to. They don't want to trade off the quality of the product, the taste aspect, and also they like it to be presented in a quality kind of a format. They're willing to pay comparable or slightly higher prices for a plant-based substitutes. What do consumers want? Taste and texture. Taste and texture comes up every time when we look at the products. As a company that is business to business kind of channel, we have several key customers for our company, for example, that are corporate customers. We also have a lot of smaller customers that include also some startups in this area, some startups that you probably heard about, and they're doing really well, but taste and texture is the thing that they're constantly working on. And the competition in the mature markets is driving this quite a bit. About 3-4 years ago, when a lot of products been launched in the market, it has not been such a concern. Traditional vegetarians, they would compromise because of the health reasons. They will consume products that are not as tasty and compromised on texture. However, flexitarians don't want to make that trade. They demand taste and texture. If you look at the Indian market, the interesting part here, and feel free to jump in here, because this is where it starts being interesting, because it's completely different from US, for example, and from Western Europe, where beef and pork are leading the meat, plant-based meat alternatives. Here in India, we see a completely different picture, and I think it's can be explained by how market traditionally has been developing. So tell us a couple words about this particular trend and why we see what we see. I can hear you, Om.
You'll have to unmute yourself, Om. Are you able to hear? Yeah.
Yes,
Perfect.
I'm able to hear. So this slide which Dennis is showing, so India's market is largely driven towards chicken and mutton, followed by seafood and egg, and it's largely driven by the eating habits of the people which this country has. So of course, so what we have seen in the Western countries, where beef and pork is more prevalent, that is not going to work here, because if you see on the consumption basis also, chicken is the most consumed product, and that's what is preferred by people over here, and that is followed by mutton again. So that's where the Indian market is going, and that is also giving you the numbers in terms of the flexitarians. So flexitarian number is also coming more from this category of chicken and mutton eaters. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Shargo, I'm trying to switch to the next slide, but okay, going back to the take kind of key takeouts from a marketing look at the meat substitutes in the Indian market. We see that Western products, or I would say Western cuisine-based products, have entered the market. They've been quite successful. There's been companies actually importing products like products from Beyond Meats and some products for the QSR sections. However, we clearly see that this segment is more of an expensive kind of a rare and rather difficult to penetrate. Also with the barriers to either natural or set barriers for entry for the exports, it's quite difficult to import the foods into India, and the biggest reason for that is the price. For a huge market where a huge portion of the population lives, the demand is huge. However, new products need to meet cost parameters that are compatible for this market. And to be successful in the Indian market, it seems like products need to be manufactured to hit this larger audience to make these products affordable. You want to say anything about the products that you see? I'm very excited to see, there's a lot of nice, interesting packaging. I can see something that looks like chicken nuggets, some like a hot dog, like sausages products. So it's really nice to see. We have a lot of products like that in US market, but it's really interesting to see these things.
Yeah, this suggests that this market have started showing traction to this category. There are a lot of new entries into this market. There has been launches in the in this market, and this is really heating up at this moment. That's what I would say. The growth, what you have said, is almost like 9% CAGR is projected for this region, and looks like the game has just started on this segment. Over to you, Janice.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
It seems like, yeah, okay. My slides did not want to change. So here's another slide from my colleagues in India talking about some new launches in the market. It seems like big chains, QSR chains are interested to penetrate the market with these things. So what we wanted to kind of switch into is actually take a look at what can we do as the company to help people get their products commercialized, get them made, and get them successful in the market. What we're looking after is these important parameters of the products: the flavor and texture, and functional solutions that actually deliver these things. What we offer and what we try to focus on is to get ingredients that actually deliver this flavor solutions. And we work with a lot of flavor partners out there, not to mention that we for some time been manufacturing the flavors ourselves and distributing under the umbrella of a larger Griffith Foods company. What's important for alternative proteins, as we call them, alternative proteins or meat substitutes, is actually flavor solutions that, let me go back to my slide here, that not only deliver the flavor, but deliver it in a way that the product is on par with a meat product that they try to replicate. It seems like people don't really want to eat a chicken substitute that doesn't taste like chicken. And if it's made from plant proteins, they really don't want to taste the plant protein. They want to taste something that reminds them of the chicken. And for the most part, they want to taste a product that is exciting, and really delivers on the flavor. Products that don't deliver on the flavor or under-deliver tend to fall off the market shelves rather quick. There's a good introductory purchase for these products, but they really don't sustain the momentum and kind of fall off the market. Texture is very important, and that relates to the distribution of these products. Some of them distributed in fresh format, but majority of them are distributed frozen, and the consumer has to reconstitute, reheat the products, and that's where the texture comes as a very important thing. Griffith, for example, plays a lot not only in providing the texture solutions as far as like binders and proteins and carbohydrates and fat substitutes. We also work quite a bit in coatings. It's quite important thing when you go to like a chicken substitutes category, where you have things like breaded products that substitute the breaded fried chicken formats. Also, we are thinking about fortification and actually delivering complete protein profiles. And this is quite important, more important in some markets than others. A complete protein profile and sort of nutritional parity with the protein that is a target for substitution, sometimes actually a prerequisite for certain markets. In Canada, for example, in Canadian market, we have to deliver a certain nutrition in order to be in the meat substitute market. So it's quite challenging. I wanted Om to actually go through these several slides really quick, talking about kind of inspirations that Griffith India put together for this presentation. Go ahead, Om, if you could tell us about these concepts.
Yeah. So what we have done is that this is few of the concepts which we have put together to give a glimpse of what all we can bring to all of you. So basically, if you see here, the concept we have put forward is vegetarian grilled Sikh kebab. Sikh kebab is one of the most popular consumed food across all the age categories and pan-India. So what the description here is like, it is a plant-based version of classical authentic Indian dish, which customer can relate to. That's what the objective was. And the Griffith offering here is flavor solution and the texture solution. So there is a one-stop solutions which we have, which include of all the complete, if you talk about the TVPs, texturized protein, you talk about the binders, you talk about the flavor solutions. So it is a integrated one-stop solutions which we offer in smaller packs as well as in the larger packs, which can be utilized in one format. So it gives you a more of a convenience to use, and you don't have to struggle in terms of getting the matrix right by combining different elements together. Okay. So second one is the concept is vegetarian spaghetti bolognese. And the objective was to take on popular Italian dish of spaghetti served in a meaty sauce with twist of plant-based mince. So most in earlier concept, when we saw the binding effect coming together, we have taken this as an individual texture, mimicking that to that of a mince meat, and or more commonly, which you call it as a keema. So that's the look and feel which has been used here. And here what we have been offering the solution is flavor solution and the texture part of it, and not the binder part. So it is very interesting that you can get a different outlook from the of the products, not only the formed products, but even the individual texturized protein can be made into an interesting use. Third concept, so is application of alternate protein on the pizza. So the concept is plant-based diced chicken pizza. Some of you might be coming across this kind of a concept. So here, the flavor delivery and the texture delivery together is the offering. And the objective here was a herby diced plant-based chicken topped on a tomato sauce pizza. So it's forming like a bulk block and then cut into individual requirements of the pieces, and it is being used into a pizza topping, and it passes through any normal pizza baking process. The other concept which you see is a sami kebab. Now, the objective here is to offer a plant-based version of a very popular Indian kebab, which is full of flavors. So kebab has a very distinct texture compared to whatever products we have looked at. So very soft, grainy kind of a texture, which you keep on eating into any of your favorite restaurants. The offering from Griffith here was again the flavor and the texture solutions. So we help out to freeze your process parameters to get those kind of texture, which gives you immediate connect with the current products which you are having on case-to-case basis, or when you visit to your popular restaurants. Next one is the AP meat burger. So this is like any other burger patties, but this is made mimicking the meat flavor and texture. So what the concept here is like plant-based grilled meat patty, which is served with the combination of different vegetables and paired with some interesting sauce, which is as per your requirement.
Thank you. Thank you, Om. Really good. As you can see, we do consider consumer insight, whether we have to do it through ourselves or we have to elaborate on our customers' consumer insights for the market. We do involve our culinary professionals in creation of this concepts for our customers. And we do present to the food service and retail. Food science is an integral part of this because as you know, all these meat substitutes are based on the ingredients that are derived from the plants, and a lot of science is involved there, a lot of technology. And we always try to employ a sensory evaluation for these things, whether for the flavor, texture, or both, because sensory attributes is very important for the continuous success of any given product in the market if you want to sustain the sales for any period of time. This is the end for the Indian portion of the presentation. I have a couple slides that kind of fell off the beginning of the presentation where I actually get into a food science and the ingredient part of it. So I have to actually get out of this one and open up another file. Shadow, okay. So here where I'm on the touch on the actual experience creating the products for a US market that we had in the last 2.5, 3 years. It's been a great ride. We included a lot of people from around the globe for Griffith. As you can see, Griffith, a larger company comprised of several divisions. I work for one of them, the one on the bottom there, on the right bottom is Nourish Ventures. We also have a Custom Culinary, a division of our company that makes sauces, the great vegan, vegetarian type of sauces for these meat substitutes. And they complement taste and texture of the products quite a bit. We have a division called Tirova that sells individual ingredients, we tend to try to sell at least ingredients that fit this kind of market, the health-driven kind of ingredients and things that are in the category of health and wellness. We have 24 R&D centers, 38 chefs globally. I try to work with all of them, especially when it comes to a particular global cuisines that we're looking at. We're trying to stay as close to gold standards when we develop the products, and when our customers kind of, don't fit that direction, we quickly bring it to focus. Taste and texture for the ingredients is important, but also nutritional and cost. We consider these as initial challenges just to get in the market, get on the shelf, get into the QSR or another fast casual chain, any food service. You got to deliver on that. Nutritional, cost, taste, and texture. However, again, if you want to continue to be successful in the market, that's where the mass appeal, market adaptation of the product, scale up is very important. A lot of companies fail to scale up from a small batch production into large batch where the quality is getting compromised. Also sourcing, extremely important is the sourcing for your product. As you grow the sales, the sourcing becomes a really limiting aspect here. And of course, the competition as new, very challenging competitors enter the market all the time with much improved texture and taste products out there, it is difficult to stay competitive. We help resolving technical challenges like these through the R&D, culinology, product development, test kitchens. We work together with our customers to kind of shorten this time horizon. We consider rapid prototyping model to product development more often than traditional product development. It seems like even for larger customers, the project span for alternative proteins is shortened significantly from a year to year and a half kind of launch of the new product, a traditional kind of time frame. We're down to months. And the risk of the supply chain, the raw materials, is so high that it's one of our great strides at Griffith is to kind of de-risk it, to make sure that whoever we work with, they don't get in a situation where they pretty much cannot source the proteins. Now I wanted to switch to actual proteins. This slide is a very busy slide, but I like it because it talks about choices of the proteins for your product. We started with the soy because soy protein is easy to extract. It's the protein that is very easy to texture, and it has a PDCAS value, the digestibility score, very high to complete protein. And traditionally, people have been open to soy protein quite a bit. So proteins made from soy protein, whether the concentrate or textured varieties, very popular, still very popular, still a lot of new products introduced into American and West European markets made from soy. However, in the last 2 years, pea protein's been pushing these boundaries because pea is a more versatile crop, and being a legume, it's actually pretty high in protein, and it also has a little bit of the healthier halo to it. A lot of consumers, at least in US, consider pea protein to be something more of an environmentally friendly crop than soybean, because there's a great understanding that at least in United States, soybean is a commercial crop that is kind of used in conjunction in agriculture, kind of interchangeably with corn. So corn and soy also has this genetically modified kind of a not as good kind of tainted image. And a lot of people try to stay kind of steer clear of soy. And also there's been quite a few conversations about the allergenicity here. So a lot of people switch to the proteins that are less prone to become allergens. But the choice is great. And a lot of these proteins, as you can see on the right, have a great protein content. A lot of these proteins are easily kind of purified out of the crops because there's a lot of them, and to extract the protein from the seed, from the source, is it doesn't take quite a bit of effort. However, we see that the prices on these traditional proteins gone up in US quite a bit. Also, availability is a huge issue. Last year, sourcing pea protein, for example, in US market was a real challenge, as a lot of players launched a pea protein-based product, a pea protein concentrate, and pea protein isolate became really tight in the market. It was very difficult for us to source. And even a soybean protein concentrate and isolate is now kind of tight in the global sourcing. It's not easy to source in all the markets. That's why a lot of people are looking at these alternatives. Potato protein is on the table. Wheat, of course, is one of the traditional sources. It's kind of not as popular by itself, but a good addition to the soy and pea, as wheat provides a unique texture to extruded products. And a lot of lately launched products in the like chicken replications, they do use combination of pea protein and wheat, or soy protein and wheat, because wheat provides that element of fibrous texture that people looking for when they consume, for example, a high moisture protein, extruded proteins. I want to change gear here since we start talking about this. Here's a nice picture of a Coperian extruder to the right, and some of the products a little bit below that are direct extrusion products, or these products been made with the extrusion technology. Well, whether if you want a texture, it seems like aside from emulsified products, you do have to go to some kind of form of extrusion. There's been quite a development in these machines and in technology itself. Some new developments that, for example, the Wangers, I believe, still patented technology of power heater, which is kind of like a different type of extrusion and provides different textures, and then a different type of combination products. Well, a traditional extrudates, which used to be extruded and dehydrated, now kind of giving the road to high moisture extrusion, which is more popular. The yields on the high moisture are lower, and the machinery is more demanding, so the price tend to be higher for the high moisture extrudate. However, in a lot of cases, the texture is superior. I don't know if some of you heard about this week's launch of KFC launching product here in US market. It's a limited time offer. It's a nugget by Beyond Meats. So I believe the product is called Beyond Chicken, and it's sold at Kentucky Fried Chicken KFC outlets for about $7 for 6 pieces of these nuggets. If you happen to taste the product, it very closely resembles the actual piece of chicken meat, and the product is actually derived through extrusion, high moisture extrusion, followed by some perforation of the extrudate sheets and marination of the product to deliver the additional flavor. And then the product is coated in breading and par fried and sold to the restaurants frozen, where it's getting reconstituted. So all these aspects bring us of production bring us to very important flavor considerations. At least in our markets, where people are object the taste, the beanie, cardboardy taste of plant proteins, we have to mask those things. So masking means we have to add the flavors that actually mask from your receptors. They either block your receptors not to taste the beanie taste, the plant protein, native taste of a plant protein, or they introduce the flavors that kind of go over the top and cover up the undesirable taste. Without products made without maskers and blockers seem to be failing in the market, and the products that employ this kind of flavor solutions seem to be doing much better. So the cleaner, the less vegetative taste products have, and the more real meaty type nose they have, the better they're doing in the market, especially in the long run. Characterization flavors, the meat type, seafood type, taste like sweet, sour, salt. All of this is, Griffith is working with a lot of flavor companies out there. I can't really say that one company would be like the best solution. I always suggest any startups or even larger corporations to utilize 2 or 3 different flavor partners if possible to work on these things, because it seems like a cooperation rather than just like a dedicated flavor supplier usually works better, especially if you try to launch different lines of products. Where you try to deliver different flavors. The companies that make a great chicken flavor not necessarily will be able to deliver on the seafood. And the dry seasoning, this is something that Griffith does a lot. We manufacture seasoning blends, and when we start working with alternative proteins and adding the seasoning blends directly to the Chapter formed proteins, meat replacers, we found out that we lose a lot of flavor. So later, through some research and kind of self-education, we found out that the problem persists, and it actually very characteristical to some proteins that we work with, namely pea protein. So if you are working with the proteins from legumes and soy protein as well, there is a factor of a flavor loss. And that flavor loss is due to flavors being electrostatically and chemically bound by the proteins themselves, because these proteins have a lot of positive and negative sites that bind polar flavor molecules. So from within several minutes to days in storage, you may lose up to 90% of flavor from either from your seasonings or from spice extracts that you may want to use in this product. So you have to kind of be very careful about what type of flavor you're adding, what kind of seasonings, and how much you have to put in. And there are also some technologies with enrobing the flavors and the seasonings into almost like a fat encapsulation or other kind of encapsulation technologies. Try to separate them from the protein and save that flavor for people to taste, not to get it bound up by the protein. Textures, you probably all heard about methacellulose, transglutaminase, and all these ugly, scary words. A lot been kind of done in US market lately to try to kind of soften the image of these texture solutions, because it is kind of essential for Chapter formed product, for example, where you have a TVP, a textured vegetable protein, hydrated and then blended with binders to form something like chicken nugget. Something like methacellulose is an essential ingredient. Why essential? Well, you can replace it with combination of gums and starches and things, but instead of one ingredient, you're going to end up with 4 or 5 or more. Texture is never going to be the same just because of the unique function of methacellulose. It's a reverse gelling. When you heat it up, it gets hard and it stays that way if the grade of methacellulose is good and high. And also emulsifying properties of this particular ingredient. So at least in US market, majority of the Chapter formed products use methacellulose. Those companies that want to stay away from these ingredients, from these binders that you have to actually name in your ingredient statement, companies usually go to a high moisture extrusion, where you don't have to bind anything. The product is actually extruded and then sized and marinated and then coated or packaged in a naked kind of way. So that bring us to other texture kind of parameters as mouthfeel and appearance. A lot of companies struggle with the appearance of the plant protein when it comes to the chicken. In the US market, a white meat chicken, the meat that comes from the chicken breast, is more expensive and more desired by general public than the dark meat, that meat that comes from the legs of the chicken and the rest of the chicken body. Because of that, plant proteins struggle to get closer in whiteness to a product that's made from chicken breast. So the nuggets, for example, the plant-based nuggets score much higher, and also any kind of like a tenders or breasts much higher if they're lighter in color on the inside. So some people gone down to modifying their processing to make the whole product lighter in color. Some people gone down to actual adding colorants. And it depends on how clean you want your ingredient statement to be. But it seems like titanium dioxide, as scary as it gets, is used in, for example, in the latest KFC launch, and the product is doing extremely well. So people in the food service, at least, don't really care about it because they don't really see the ingredient statement when they buy the product. Now, fats has been a huge issue. Initially, when products been launched in 2017, for example, when Beyond Foods launched the famous Beyond Burger, and kind of nationally in the U.S., people been shocked by the amount of fat, namely coconut fat, chopped up coconut fat, the pieces of that you could see that actually replaced the fat in the ground beef. And when they looked at the amount of that, it was higher in saturated fat than 80% ground beef. That created an issue where people start really objecting some of these tropical fats, and a lot of companies start turning to other solutions, either making their products with unsaturated oils, or going to more technologically advanced options like oleogels. If you have not heard about oleogels, this is probably one of the possibilities for the future to make products that mimic the meat with a meat type and the fat that characteristical to pork, mutton, and beef, but derived through oleogels. So I highly suggest paying attention to this option. Another important consideration is equipment, and I have this couple pictures on the right where we talk about very very kind of a dedicated type of vacuum equipped machinery that is used to make alternative proteins in actual production. Removal of the air gets the proteins closer together, and they start interacting. They start electrostatically binding and aligning with each other. So this consideration is very important. So when companies look at the purchase of new equipment, we always reiterate that you have to consider a vacuum and also a proper chilling of the blend in the processing, because a lot of activation of the gums and specifically methacellulose happens at the lower temperatures. The colder your product is, the more faster and better the methacellulose will activate. The less of that you need in your product, and the more proper texture you will get out of it. So considerations like that are very important, and should be talked over with engineers and actual people in charge of the production. A lot of startups that we work with try to compromise on the equipment, and that just causes the extra spending down the road, and the extra unnecessary loss of invested money. You gotta get the right equipment right off the start, and we've been able to work with great companies that provide this, like Riser, for example. The Riser distributor of these materials has been very forthcoming in the US to help us out, and the GIA in Europe with these solutions for the right equipment to get the right texture. This kind of concludes my portion about ingredient and the processing consideration. This topic is very large. It's very technical, and to talk in kind of more detail about that will take, of course, much more time. So I will be able to answer any kind of questions that may come up after this.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dennis, for this presentation. I think it was full of insights. What I'm going to do, Om and Dennis, is I'm going to start with Benjamin's session. And after that, in the last leg, we can take questions where I am thinking from the incoming questions and the questions I also had from your presentation. We can just take them in a Q&A kind of panel discussion format so that if we need to, we can open up the slides to go to anything specific, and then I can ask those questions as well. Perfect. So having said that, a very warm welcome to Benjamin. Thank you so much for joining us. So I think you might be currently in Singapore, right, Benjamin?
Yes, I am based here in sunny Singapore. So hello to everyone around the world, and I guess also in India as well.
Fantastic. So we're really glad you were able to join us a little late in the Singapore time, but thank you so much for joining today. And I've already made a small introduction, but just to refresh people who've joined us now, Benjamin works with Big Idea Ventures. He's working a lot. He's a chef and has a culinary background, but is currently working on helping startups on their channel strategy, culinary applications, and thinking about strategy and business development when it comes to marrying the concepts of culinary innovation along with new product development in the smart protein sector. Benjamin, I'll let you, tell a little bit more about, your role currently with Big Idea Ventures, what kind of startups and what kind of usual support you're able to provide, and then get into your presentation as well.
Sure, fantastic. Just a quick question. How much time are we looking at? Maybe 15 or 30 minutes?
Yeah, you can easily go for 30 minutes, and then we can have 30 minutes more for the Q&A in the last leg. And, Dennis and Om, I'll request, and Pratima as well, I'll request you to stay back for the session so we can, have a joint Q&A with all four of you.
Okay, fantastic. Yes, a big thanks to Shardul for inviting me to this webinar. Really excited to talk to everyone. And a little bit about Big Idea Ventures. So we are a global investment firm, venture capital firm. We have offices and accelerator programs in New York, Paris, and also in Singapore. We currently are deploying capital from a fund called the New Protein Fund #1, and that is a USD $50 million fund. Basically, our main thesis for investing is solely focused on the alternative protein category. So we don't really go outside of that thesis. We invest in plant-based companies, we invest in cell-based companies, and also we invest in the fermentation space, precision fermentation as well. Sometimes we support companies that are working within those categories themselves, whether it be a company working on scaffolding for cell-based or a company working on lipids and fats applications. So that's really the only types of companies that we invest in. Every 6 months, we open up our applications, and I'm sure many of you have probably applied or know of our company. And we open up applications for a 5-month accelerator program. And we usually select 5 or 6 companies per market. And so yearly in each city, in each market, we're investing in about 12 to 20 companies. To date, we've made investments into 65 companies around the world. Most of them are in the US, but then also spread out throughout Europe and then also here in Southeast Asia. Our general investment structure is a $200,000 package, USD. 125,000 of that is cash as equity straight into the business. And then the other 75,000 is in-kind services. So that's sort of the structure of our deals with our companies. We generally do those in safe notes, which I'm sure many of the founders are aware of. So that's sort of the structure for BIV. We have a 5-month program that's really exciting. We have over 300 mentors throughout the world that are working for large corporates, government, researchers, and universities. And we sort of bring them together to really help to coach our startups. And we do weekly strategy sessions around everything from marketing to packaging to patents and legal and on and on. So our purpose is really not to just invest into these companies, but also spend a good amount of time with them, coaching them, getting them to the next level. And really the purpose is to ultimately at the end of the program have a demo day, which we do, which is global, where the companies will be pitching and generally looking for Series A funding. And 65% of our companies actually secure at least $1 million in Series A or pre-Series A funding from the demo day itself. So we have a really great track record. We've invested in a number of other companies as direct investments. Some of you guys might know Shuck Meats, based out of Singapore, working on cell-based crustacean. So we've had a really great relationship with them, and then also a number of other direct investments as well. If you guys want to learn more about Big Idea Ventures, the website is bigideaventures.com. We are pretty much closing up the applications for the cohort number 5, which is we're doing due diligence on companies now. If you'd like to send me some information, or if you're interested in applying as well, we might be able to sneak you in. My email is benjamin.pippin, Pippin, at bigideaventures.com. If you'd like to send me some materials, and I can push you to the right folks across the world. But generally for India, we are sort of pushing those founders and entrepreneurs towards the Paris cohort. So that's a little bit of background about BIV. I just wanted to jump into our presentation. Shardul, you guys can see my screen?
Yes, we can, absolutely.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to talk about, and Girik gave a really great overview of more of the technical applications within alternative proteins. I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of high level kind of macro concepts that chefs are considering when they're talking about alternative proteins. Oftentimes founders and startups get very focused on marketing and focused on distribution and getting funding, but ultimately their products are going to end up in the hands of either two types of people, one of which is a professional chef or somebody that works in food service.
Just a quick chime in. I think we are still on the introduction slide, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. There we go. And so they're looking at two different types of people that will be working with the products. One is either a chef, a professional chef, and then on the other side, more on retail and CPG products. Your product will end up in the hands of everyday people that are cooking at home. So this presentation is more focused on the professional chef side. There's a whole other world to talk about in terms of amateur cooks and home cooks using your products in their own kitchens. But this presentation will focus a little bit more on the chef application side. So a little bit about me. I'm from the US originally. I grew up in New York City. My mother owned a restaurant. My mother's a French chef, so I've been cooking sort of since I was a little kid. I have a bachelor's of science from Drexel University in Philadelphia. As soon as I graduated from undergrad, I actually started cooking in New York for a number of Michelin star chefs, mostly working in Italian, but also working in French and also in hot cuisine or in fine dining. So I've been recently came to Asia in 2017 into Hong Kong. I was working for Food Panda at the time. I also opened a number of restaurants in Hong Kong. Before Big Idea Ventures, I was with Grab, working for Grab Food on the strategy team and really working in the tech landscape for the last 4 or 5 years. While I was in Hong Kong, got introduced to Impossible Foods at the restaurant that I own, and was also the chef there. So really got interested in alt proteins about 3 or 4 years ago. And personally started changing my diet and also looking to find more sustainable ways to feed the world, especially when talking about protein. So that's a bit of my background. You can see here, that's me down at the bottom right. I think I'm 22 or 23 years old, cooking pasta in New York City. I'm a part owner in 2 restaurants in Hong Kong, 10 years of culinary experience, and I'm part owner in Maria Group, which is Michael White, who's a chef out of the US. That's his restaurant group. And I worked for him for about 6 years. A lot of what I've done in my chef past is about culinary branding. So you can imagine some of your products in these sort of environments, whether it be on the left, the restaurant Eat It, which is in Hong Kong, working for burgers and also applications in sort of more quick service food. Also applications like charcuterie and higher end Italian. You can see some of those alt protein potentials there. And then also on the top right, Alvy's is another restaurant in Hong Kong that's still operating. For those of you that know the Kennedy Town part of Hong Kong, that's where Alvy's is. And that's sort of more of a tap room, a beer bar, and also we serve like very high-end sort of artisanal pizzas. So there's a huge market there for pizza as well in terms of vegan cheese. And if you talk to pizza chefs, the main thing is trying to find the right cheese and how it operates in the oven and the temperatures and how it melts. So I have a lot of background in applications of these products. Also worked a lot with menu design. You can see some of the past projects here. Also, it's very important that you focus on the concept of your product and how it's going to be perceived by the public. If you look at the top right, there's a costada prime rib for 2, really well cooked. But if you actually look behind there, it's being held up by a number of different wooden picks, and it's actually, you know, not really edible at that point, even though it is food. So there's a lot to consider when working with chefs, and also thinking about your products and the way that chefs are going to use them and promote them on your behalf. Also worked a lot with recipe development. You can see here some of the recipes that I've developed. I have a catalog of about 500 plus recipes. So here's kind of where we jump into what chefs think about when they're thinking about alternative proteins and the applications in their restaurants. Obviously, the biggest one is probably cost, depending on whether it's a more casual restaurant or all the way up to fine dining. The cost considerations for chefs vary. Obviously, at the lower end restaurant, it's the food cost of the actual of the entire menu is extremely important for margins, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then as you get into more fine dining, the cost considerations aren't as strong, because most of the time the Michelin star chefs are creating enough revenue to really purchase the highest products available to them. Texture, I'm sure you guys focus on this quite a bit, but for chefs, texture changes in different cooking applications at different temperatures, different cooking media. So texture is also really, really important. Flavor, that's a big one. I think Girik touched on this really well when talking about masking flavors, and also trying to mimic flavors of animal proteins as well is really, really important there for chefs to consider. Uses as well is also a big one in terms of what equipment does the actual chef have at hand. If he doesn't have a deep fryer and your product only can be deep fried properly, that's going to be an issue. If it's, you know, also needed to be in an oven, or if it's cooked as a pizza in a 500-degree oven, how does your, you know, product stand up? So in the R&D sense, a lot of that should be working with these chefs and understanding the applications in their restaurant. Shelf life is as well is also a big one when we talk about inventory and also food costing, which leads me to my next slide, which is the consideration between fresh and frozen. So as you guys probably know, if you go to the supermarket for CPG products, oftentimes a lot of the products are frozen, whether it be Impossible or Beyond, and the consumer is bringing that home. They're keeping it in their freezer and then defrosting it and cooking it when they're ready to use it. It's very similar in restaurants, although the big benefit there that's similar to home cooks is that the shelf life and the stability of the product when it's in a freezer can be anywhere from 1 month all the way to 6 months. So from a chef's perspective, that's really, really helpful when you're trying to understand your inventory, and also when you're trying to figure out how much of a product you're going to sell. When you have a frozen product that's sitting in your freezer while you're a chef, you know that you have that on hand. If there's a super busy rush and then you know, you need more product the next day, you can basically pull it out of the freezer and get ready. If you've run out of something and it's not in the freezer when it's on the fresh side, obviously you're in a bit of a situation where if you can't get the product, then you can't sell it and it's not on the menu. And we call it 86ing for those of you that have worked in restaurants, when you run out of a product, and that can be a really big issue because it reflects poorly on the restaurant, reflects poorly on the chef. And also if your customers want a product, you always want to have it available to them. So for founders and startups, whether they're looking at a frozen product or a fresh product, depending on the CPG, depending on the application and the product itself, is extremely important from a chef's perspective as well. Along with fresh and frozen considerations, the product format is also really important. This slide is pretty straightforward. As you move from whole cut all the way to minced and also molded, you're looking at a loss of control for the chef. At the core, when a chef is looking at making meatballs homemade, right, he's probably buying different types of cuts, then he's grinding them with different amounts of fats, and then building his recipe around all of those different components, which means that he as the chef has complete control over that recipe. As you go further to the right, and you're looking at finished products like chicken nuggets or burgers, the chef really loses a lot of the control because he or she only has one option, whether it's to drop it into the deep fryer or season it and put it onto a grill. So you're also looking at potential limitations for the chef, which can be very difficult, because the higher up that you go in the chain of quality restaurants, the chef wants to be known for his creativity. He wants to be known for his ability to use these products. And if he's just deep frying chicken nuggets and then putting them on a plate, that's not really showcasing his product. And that also might not fit with the quality of the restaurant and what they're producing. So product format is really important when considering building out what you're offering to chefs. And some really cool and interesting advancements, I think, in the last year or two is over in the mycelium world. There's been a lot sort of happening in terms of whole cut mycelium, which is interesting because, again, that gives the chef a higher level of control of what they can do with the product. So just want to jump over, for those of you that don't have a lot of background in the restaurant industry, and also in terms of what folks are thinking about when they're thinking about their P&L. Just like you think about a P&L for your business, restaurants are thinking about their P&L every day. Restaurants are also seasonal. So we're coming through, the end of the year. So usually Q4 of a yearly cycle is really strong for restaurants. You have Thanksgiving, you have Christmas, you have New Year's. So there's a lot of celebrations. People are generally spending more. And then throughout the year, the summers can be a little bit less. So you can sort of think of, oftentimes restaurants will be in the red for the summer, but then they'll be in the black for the holiday season. But when they look at their business performance over the year, obviously the most important thing is being profitable. So not only is it seasonal, day by day also changes as well. Oftentimes restaurants lose money Monday through Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday over the weekend is when they make that money back. So chefs are constantly thinking about the cycles of the week, what they're ordering, what they're bringing in, and things like that. If you look at the breakdown financially of what a restaurant is thinking of, and oftentimes restaurants do not have savings or money in the bank. They're operating month by month. So if something changes, or a product doesn't work or a menu item doesn't work, it can be very high risk, which is why the restaurant industry is quite difficult. If you look at the red box on the right, that's food costs. So you're looking at 25% of your revenue would be dedicated just to the purchasing of all the foods stuffs that you bring in the door that you end up selling. There's also food waste that's linked to that, but we won't go into that here. And generally, that's 25% of your revenue for the month. On the rental side for your actual business, if you're not the owner of the space, obviously you're paying rent. In Hong Kong, in Singapore, in New York, other cities around the world, rents can be very, very high. So generally looking at 40% there, and then your labor cost for your staff is around 30%. Operating profits for restaurants that are doing really well is generally 2 to 5%, which is a very small margin, right? So the margins are razor thin. So you're constantly considering the cost of your food cost. And if you look at the breakdown on the left, you can see if you were to, in Hong Kong, pull in $1 million for a month, your operating profit would be 30,000, and that would be really strong, but obviously not a huge margin there. So when you're talking about food costing, and if your food cost goes up to 30%, you can automatically see that you're basically going into your profit margin, and you would be losing money for that month. So super important on understanding what a chef is thinking about, what owners are thinking about. So when they're thinking about food cost changes, because generally a rental and labor costs are fixed, the food cost is the one that fluctuates. So price for your product, especially in food service, is extremely important. Just wanted to drill down to give you guys a little bit better understanding of how maybe a burger would look on a menu. You can see in the bottom left, this company called Tyndall, which I'm sure you guys have heard of, that's developing into a lot of different markets here. This is directly off a menu in Singapore. So they're selling a burger, a chicken burger, for $20 on the menu. And generally you can see, if we go back to the last slide, if we're focused on a 25% food cost and the menu price is $20, you're looking at a $5 per burger food cost. So, and if you look at some of the ingredients that make up a burger, which is literally all that you get when you order that menu item, you're looking at $3 for the beef, which 3 into 5 is about 60%. So the rest of the ingredients, the burger bun, the mayo, the cheese, the tomato, the lettuce, these are all much less expensive to the chef. So when he's looking at his cost of beef, that's really what's going to be the majority of his cost. So oftentimes, proteins and alternative proteins are living in that chicken, beef, seafood world. And the protein is generally the most expensive part of the plate, which goes back to the concept of food costing and being able to price your product that's going to be attractive for chefs. Because if you are selling beef, and Impossible had this issue, if you're buying 80-20 ground beef as a chef and it's, $4 per kilo, if a sales rep from Impossible Foods or from one of your companies comes in and says, what are you selling it at? They're going to ask you, and you say $8 per kilo. That's twice as much as they're paying already. So as a result, the cost of the food item would have to go up to continue to have that 25%. So that's a little bit on food costing. I hope that was helpful. That sort of rounds out my presentation for now. I'll give the time back to potential Q&As for everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Benjamin. So actually starting out with your second slide, I had a question around, if you can go back to your previous slide around costing. So obviously, when we are looking at early adopter cohorts who are relatively looking to pay a little bit more because of the health aspects, sustainability aspects, or perhaps nutrition aspects, the animal-free cruelty aspects, how much kind of a leeway are we really looking here in terms of, increasing the prices compared to the animal counterpart offerings in a QSR or a restaurant kind of format, and how much that leaves, for example, innovators in this new category with an advantage or disadvantage? I know the costs are currently obviously on the higher side for plant-based meats, but let's say at scale, if they're able to price competitively, then maybe some thoughts around this.
Yeah, absolutely. From our research and what we've learned in terms of pricing with startups, obviously, as you increase in scale, the price of your product is going to come down. I think that most consumers that are, focused on health or animal welfare and also climate change can really push someone to spend that extra $2 or $3 on a burger rather than buying the traditional animal protein. But I think that in terms of the arc of alternative proteins and where we are in sort of the timeline, a lot of those early adopters that were willing to spend early on have sort of, they're going to be your customers for a while, but the sort of flexitarians and those folks that are trying to eat less meat that aren't as adopted to the cause or for the cause, those are the ones that were sort of at the tail end where the price is becoming as important. When Impossible first launched, people pretty much didn't care about the price because it was sort of a novelty. There was an Instagram, you want to share with your friends, you want to tell people that you're trying this new product on the market, absolutely willing to spend more. And that's really on the plant-based side. On the cell-based side, obviously, there's a whole other conversation for the founders out there that are working in cell-based. Price parity is looking like a further down the road. But again, if you are a cell-based company, what you can focus on is not talking about the costing as much because everybody kind of understands that it's not there. But what a really strong strategy, and we tell a lot of our cell-based companies to do this, is find an ambassador. Find a chef that's in your city or that's in your region and go to them and say, do you want to try working with our product? If you do have, a pilot product that's ready to be used, go to them and offer them the product and get them to endorse, put that on your pitch deck, tell investors about that, use the chef as your ambassador to really go out there and be able to validate that your product tastes good, you can cook it, those types of things. Here in Singapore, as you know, the government here has the regulatory body has approved cell-based chicken, which is being sold here in Singapore from Eat Just, and they really pushed hard on marketing that, and it can be a huge boost if it's not being sold in the chef's restaurant. If you go there and take some photographs of the food, maybe make a video of the chef using it, and use that in your presentation. Investors really like to see that a professional chef has been using your product. And would validate it too. So price parity on plant-based is getting there, but on the cell-based side, obviously, there's some things that cell-based companies can do to sort of create a narrative that's more focused on chefs. That's it for me, Shardul.
Makes sense. Yeah. Thank you so much for that response. So I think what we can do is you can stop sharing your screen and we can go to the Q&A with all our panelists today. So Dennis and Om and Prathama, if you want to switch on your cameras as well. So welcome to the Q&A section of this session today. We've heard from Dennis, Om, and Benjamin on different aspects of product development, use of ingredients, applications, flavors, textures, thinking about different aspects of culinary-led innovation approach, thinking about QSR restaurants as your end consumers for channel distribution, and key considerations when you're thinking about these stakeholders as you're thinking about your larger plant-based meat, eggs, dairy business. And I think you can extrapolate a lot of these insights to your specific areas and backgrounds as well. But we'll start with one of our first few attendees, who is Rami. So do you want to switch on your camera, or perhaps tell us a little bit about the products you're working on and then ask your question, Rami?
Thank you very much, Shardul, and thanks to all the panelists. Specifically, I have a question for Benjamin, and as a quick background, we're a B2B ingredient supplier. We transform any type of vegetable waste into mushroom protein and flavor enhancers. And in that sense, we've been actually fast-tracked by Molly Rockland, one of your colleagues for Big Idea Ventures, and we're applying for the upcoming cohort. And I was mentioning to her recently that we have been working with a multinational to enhance one of their bread products. They're present all over the world, and we're working with them specifically in the country of Chile in South America. And if we were to succeed, they could be requesting like 64 kilograms of our product per hour, basically, which is a lot. However, since we're not experts in final product development, we've been having some issues in how to integrate our flavor enhancer into their baked good. So in that sense, I wanted to ask you, Benjamin, maybe if you've got a reference of a colleague or an experimental kitchen that could like cooperate with us in this work, and maybe it could be a part of their business as well.
Yeah, absolutely. One good route to do is if you look at, your roadmap and how much, cash you have in the bank, and you're doing your own budget, you can potentially dedicate, $2,000 to $10,000 out of your budget to have a chef partner, and you can pay them. You can put them on your payroll. They can be, a consultant, and chefs understand that this is coming. So most of the chefs in the world are eager to get their hands dirty and to work with some of these products. If you're talking about bakery applications, what I would do is reach out to those folks that are within, where you can basically outsource your R&D to a professional, and you can get direct feedback on that as well. So if you find a baker or someone in your community or within your city that you think would be great, talk to them on LinkedIn, walk into their restaurant. A lot of our founders just go into restaurants that they really like. And if they're trying to work with the chef, they'll bring a sample with them. They'll sit down, they'll have dinner. They'll tell the waiter, hey, could you bring this back to the chef? And then usually the chef will come out and be like, wow, this is cool. Like, what's your company all about? You create the relationship with the chef. The chef is excited because he wants to learn about the category, and you get a benefit as well from getting direct feedback and also potentially formulations. And if you're going to a large company that to maybe be a co-manufacturer, or if you're working on product, if you can bring them something that you've developed with a chef already, that's a huge plus, especially for investors and for follow-on investing. You can reach out to me directly. I'm not sure how much contacts I have in Chile, but we're more than willing to help you connect with the right chefs and give you some guidance on that as well.
Yeah, perfectly. And we can ship our sample anywhere in the world that you point us to. That would be amazing, Benjamin.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Sure. I wish you luck. I hope you get into the cohort as well.
Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rami. Thank you for that question. I saw a lot of questions were already answered in the Q&A, but Bhavesh Kumar, Jani, do you want to quickly perhaps clarify those aspects of your question? I'll allow you to talk.
Yeah, very good evening. Am I audible?
Yes, Bhavesh.
Yeah,
we can
so
hear you.
I have a question for Benjamin as well. In case of as we are in track 1 and we are developing plant-based ingredients, sir, do you think that these pulses and legumes are having possible applications in case of plant-based ingredient in the preparation of plant-based meat, particularly like textured product or textured flour? And more than that, how much percent it should be utilized, as you are a chef and you are having a greater experience than others?
Yeah, sure. I think I can pass it over to the Griffith folks who have, I think more expertise than me in really the formulation side. But what I would say is to really shoot for the moon on your flavor, because even if you, and let's be honest, at the moment, the incumbents, whether it's, you're talking about Beyond or if you're talking about Impossible, they taste good, right? But they're not great, and I think that unfortunately that's holding back a lot of customers. And as an industry, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, we really need to deliver on flavor. And oftentimes plant proteins get there, but they don't deliver that 100% to convince some of our consumers that this is really the way to go. So from my perspective, I think a lot of chefs agree around the world that they're good, but the products just aren't great. And I don't think anybody has the silver bullet, because at the end of the day, the molecular makeup of a plant is different than an animal when you really break it down. So it's going to taste different. So I think that as everybody works on this together, I think that from a chef's point of view, we really need to deliver on the flavor. And there's some steep competition out there as well. And legumes, as you said, can be difficult. So I would say, shoot for the stars, because chefs are very particular, as I'm sure a lot of you guys know.
Thank you. And another thing that I need to ask to
I think, Kavish, before we go on to the next question, I love Om and Dennis, because they've already worked with probably indigenous crops, pulses and legumes. So perhaps starting with Dennis on your thoughts on the applications and the challenges therein, and then perhaps Om, because
okay, thank you.
well, you can shed some light on that.
Yeah, when you take a look at protein concentrates that derive from legumes, they seem to have a stronger vegetative kind of beany, cardboardy taste that is not desired. So if you want to construct, let's say, a chicken analog from soy protein or from wheat protein, you may end up using anywhere between like 1 to 2.5–3% of a flavor in your end product for all the purposes: the masking, the bitter blocking, and then the overall meat type flavoring. But as you switch to legumes, you either have to go to a more robust, stronger flavor solution, or you have to increase the flavor use, which is very expensive. Flavors is the most expensive component of your product makeup. For example, if protein is going to cost you somewhere under $1 a pound, and the binders are going to cost you around $2 to $3, maybe $5 a pound, your flavor solutions will start anywhere from 10 and go all the way up to $20 a pound. These prices are very characteristical for Western Europe and US. So you can see you can't use a lot of flavors. You're just going to run out of room for your profit. Your product is going to be too expensive. Now, what you can do, and especially for Indian market, and from the chef standpoint, is try to flavor your product with seasonings and try to actually create a flavor profile that plays along with the vegetative taste of the protein, or actually kind of falls into the category where it belongs. To give you an example, Americans, they don't want to taste beans in anything. When Americans eat beans, for example, they put barbecue sauce, sweet barbecue sauce, and all you taste is a barbecue sauce and bacon or smoked meat. You don't taste the beans. However, when you go to the Mexican restaurant in US, you expect to taste the beans, the refried beans, the beans in the meal, and you don't object to it because they're seasoned with corresponding flavors, the seasoning solution for that meal. So you kind of buy into the whole flavor profile. You eating a dish versus just trying to eat the protein that's been made to taste like a meat. So try to work from the perspective of creating overall the whole solution with the meal, with the concept flavor, with the actual food flavor, rather than just try to flavor protein as the meat, because that's very expensive route. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Shardul.
Absolutely. I'll love Om to jump in here and add any further thoughts based, just to complement Dennis and Benjamin's thoughts as well.
No, actually, Dennis covered everything of what I was planning to explain that, and he has beautifully explained that. So that's the basic crux. Whenever you want to decide any individual, instead of addressing the individual components, you have to go for the holistic solutions. And that's what Benjamin was giving an interesting example of the US-based product and the Mexican-based product. And here you have to look into your local regional flavors and tie up with the seasonings, which will help you to mask your overall off notes, and same time it will help you to reduce the flavor usage. And what Dennis said in the dollars, I think the trend is equally the same in Indian market as well. So flavors are the biggest contributors. The only reason is that when you're using flavors in this category, you look forward to use the natural flavors, which are not economical, not cheap. So you have to, since you are working towards going towards healthier options, you need to go for the natural flavors. And that's where the combination of flavors and the seasonings corresponding to your end dish or end product is very important.
So it can be said, that after having a proper texture, the first and more important thing would be seasoning and flavors in the product, right? Thank you.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. I'll actually would love to invite, before we go on to Nitin, Pratima, to just share a little bit about your work in the product development cycle at Griffith. And, for example, if you're working on any plant-based meat, you could just take us through your overall, plan for developing such products and how perhaps you think about ingredients and texturization and flavors in the whole process.
Yeah, so at Griffith, India, we work on plant-based protein, which are both Indian format as well as the other Western formats. So for the Indian format, I think the flavors, taking away from what Dennis and all said, products like sheikh kebab, shami kebab, or things like that, it is much easier to mask the beanie flavors, because these in the Indian dishes as such has a lot of spices in it. So in these kind of products, we kind of use the traditional or authentic spices, so which also kind of mask the other notes, and then the protein part, like the chicken note and the other related notes, can follow further. So that is a little easier to kind of create or develop. Yes, and we do use texturized proteins, binders. These are all the regular ingredients that is part of the pyramid of development.
Got it. So I have a question actually as a follow-up for Om and Pratima, perhaps from an India perspective, as a corporate who's working with, say, startups, other larger corporates, and giving solutions on all of these areas. What do you see as the key skill sets, especially for people with a technology background, right? Maybe a food science background, maybe a agri-tech background, maybe a chemical engineering background, biochemistry, microbiology background, who are interested in this space. So for example, as a potential employer of a lot of students who might be in the cohort, who might be looking to apply to such roles in the corporate world, working and researching on smart protein challenges too. So currently in India, we are at a, say, version 1.5 kind of products, right? Where version 1 would be soy nuggets or soy chaps, or mimics of meat like for meats or mock meats, really. So we are kind of in the past 3 years come to version 1.5, and then globally, let's just say Impossible Beyond already well on way to 2.5 version 3 products, right? With a lot of sensory replication, texture replication. So to bridge that gap between now and then, what challenges do you see? What skill sets do you see as requirements in the market? Perhaps you can start on adding on to it, and then perhaps we can go on to Pratima. Then we'll circle back to Benjamin and Dennis for the next leg of questions.
So, Sardul, I think you brought a very valid point. So how do we bridge the gap from reaching out from 1.5 to 2.5? Now, one interesting thing, what my observations from past few years has been is, we need to understand the requirement of the market here. The market which is there in the Western format and the Indian format, they're not going together. So the acceptability of the Western format products are still at a very niche stage, that's what I would say. But having said that, the other formats, the other Indian formats, India has already been consuming a lot of plant proteins. But into their day-to-day I would say the curries, the pulses, what is getting consumed, or even through the cereals which they consume. So the interesting thing here would be that how do we convert products more into the Indian traditional formats which can relate to day-to-day consumptions patterns instead of going into the niche category, which is like it's still considered as a snacking item. The burgers and nuggets are still considered as a snacking item, which is the Western format. But how do you convert it into a, let's say, a keema stuffed into a samosa, which is more of a generic product, and it becomes the usability and the acceptability of the products goes multifolds. So this is where I feel that developing the product more suitable for traditional product, which gives them more familiarity with the Indian profiles, the day-to-day profiles, will take the market a little more faster, while the Western format still continues to grow at its own pace, which we have already seen like 8 to 9%, which we are looking at in next 5 years. That will be there, but to pace up, we need to parallelly start the process as well.
Got it. So for that, what kind of technical skills would you say, Pratima, kind of required? What kind of people you'll be looking to hire? What kind of talent do you really need? With what kind of skill sets and backgrounds to bridge that gap in new product development or innovation in culinary aspects?
Okay. Key skills, I think it's the understanding of the basic science, how it works, what are proteins, what are plant-based proteins, the structure of plant-based protein, probably globular fiber. Those are the key things I think one should know. And though, probably I think there are many students and, aspirational students here. So when it's probably seen or read on a book, it may sound very bookish, and it may not be so interesting. But then when you actually get your hands dirty and work in the lab, so these understandings does matter a lot. How a protein helps in binding, and what are binders, and how we have studied that pH influences the structure of a protein. So we see that in the application sometimes, the kind of flavors that are used, how it's affecting the final texture of the product and things like that. Yes, I think understanding of the basic science is very important here. That's the key, according to me.
So Sardul, just to add to what Pratima says, so 3 aspects of, when you look into the academics, we need to look students from the agriculture background. Second thing is we need a protein experts. So protein technology, there are courses like, if I see CFTRI and NIFTM, there are protein technology courses being carried out. And third is cereal technology, where you need to have the carbohydrate and the starches matrix or chemistry understood well. And fourth, I would say, is the chemistry background, where your organic chemistry related to the flavor comes into the play. And most importantly, whatever is there, we need to, we have seen in one of Dennis' slide when he was presenting on protein digestibility scores. So if your protein is not easily digestible as your meat products, then it is a challenge. So we need to bridge that gap as well to make it more efficiently absorbed in your body, and to claim really that this is a protein which you should be taking that. So these are the couple of fields which we need to target to bridge these gaps.
Makes sense. Thank you so much. I would have one last question for you. We can circle back to it towards the end, but Nitin, I'll invite you to ask your question.
Thanks a lot, Shardul, for the opportunity. My question would be for Benjamin. Benjamin, this is Nitin Shetty over here. So me, along with my teammates, Dr. Swapnil and Shailendra, we are currently working on developing cell-based seafood products over here. So that's currently our RFP that we are working upon. But as we all know that cultivated meat as an industry is in a very nascent stage, not only from a product development standpoint, but also from a regulatory standpoint. So having said this, my question relates to the Big Idea Ventures cohort. So if we were to, because we have been following Big Idea Ventures for quite some time and would love to be a part of the cohort. So at what stage of product development, from a cultivated meat standpoint, at what stage of product development would Big Idea Ventures be interested in shortlisting a cultivated meat startup into their cohort? This is one part of the question. The second part is, if you could provide us some details about like how can we apply and which cohort would be opening soon enough, and what are the kind of attributes that you're looking out for from a startup which is interested in associating themselves with the cohort. I'm extremely thankful for the amazing presentation for today, Benjamin.
You're on mute, so just yeah, perfect.
Yeah, great question. There's a lot to unpack there, but I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. On the cell-based side, so we've made a number of investments into cell-based. What we're looking for entrepreneurs is a proof of concept is difficult to come by at this moment, because honestly, a lot of the companies are at the lab stage, and it's hard for us to really get our hands on products and to try samples, because oftentimes the sample is living in a culture that's, it's not ready for an application in terms of food. And then if you look at sort of a company like Shiok Meats, or even what they're doing with Eat Just, those companies have put, millions of dollars into their R&D, and they're just able to give samples, very small amounts of samples, to select people. But for our case, generally what we're looking for when we make investments is the founder and the founding team. It's a bit cliche in venture capital to say that you invest in people, but at the end of the day, you really are investing in people. We look for people with incredible spirit, incredible technical backgrounds, and that are really mission driven as well. We recently invested in a company called Fisheroo out of Singapore. 22-year-old founder, just finished up his undergrad, and we just really believed in him. So in terms of the stage of the company, obviously our ticket sizes are very small, so we invest in very early companies. So I would encourage anybody to apply. And in terms of where your product is in cell-based, as you said, it's so nascent that oftentimes there isn't an actual pilot product. But we do have a number of PhDs on the team that will do a technical deep dive into what you're working on. And the more information you give us, the better, because then we can really assess where you are with your business. And on the application side, you could go to the website, and also you can email me directly. And for anybody based in India, I believe that you would come to either Singapore or you would be going to the Paris location, depending on your business strategy and what you guys want to do over the next year or two. Obviously, we've been running the program remotely for the last year and a half. So we invest in companies that don't have to be incorporated in Europe or in Singapore. And we can do the program remotely. But what you're really benefiting from with us is the network that we have. It's really the ticket size, and the investment is really not the major motivator for a lot of founders. It's more being able to connect with our networks around the world. Our limited partners, who are the folks that invested in the fund itself, are some global companies that the Griffith folks definitely know. Givaudan, Buehler, AAK, Meiji out of Japan. These are our limited partners. So we have direct connections to them. The limited partners are learning a lot about the startup community because they're invested in the fund, and we're constantly bringing them the best talent in the world and constantly connecting them, whether they need extruders from Buehler or they need flavor and fragrance advice from Givaudan. That's really the power of what we do. So yeah, please send an email to me or go directly to the website if you'd like to apply.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Benjamin. And also the speakers from Griffith, thanks a lot for an amazing seminar.
Thank you, Nitin. Thank you for that question. So last call for questions. We are slightly under time, but we still have, I think, a couple of questions coming in. So one was around protein isolate. So I think I'll direct this to Dennis, but Om is also answering it. So Dennis, the question's from Abhirami, and it asks about how the PDCAS values or perhaps the digestibility scores affect when you're processing proteins from plants, and perhaps, concentrates, isolates, just a general, perhaps insight on this kind of aspect and how to think about it when you're new product development, culinary blendings of different proteins, or creating synergies between different plant proteins. I think just extrapolating from her question, if you can talk about these things, that would be helpful.
Okay, yeah, understood. Yeah, good question. The PDCAS score is important, but you have to understand that PDCAS score is assigned by regulatory bodies to the protein. PDCAS score cannot be evaluated in the lab. You can't take a plant-based nugget, put it in some kind of device, and it'll give you the PDCAS score. That's not really what you do. You decide on the quality of the proteins that go in there, on the digestibility and the score of the proteins in the beginning. Some companies know that if they work with pea protein and the score is around 80 something, they have to raise up the score, and they utilize, for example, rice protein concentrate to bump up that score. Because they don't want to go to soy. Soy is higher, but they don't want to go to soy because they want to stay allergen free, for example. And they work with pea protein, but then also rice protein. So it's a combination of different proteins that give you the higher score. Traditionally, if you eat legumes and you eat wheat product, bread, anybody with food science education knows if you combine two, you get complete protein intake. So, just by eating, legumes and wheat product, you get a complete protein. Well, that's the traditional passage. There are some novel proteins there. There's a fava bean that I see has been used. Mung bean protein is used a lot in egg replacement and the cheese type of product replacement. Some of them has a very low score. Again, people add a little bit of not as functional, but yet the protein that raises the score up. So that's the way to do it. Fortunately, consumer doesn't see, when they go and buy the product, they don't see the score. They really don't know what that is. And a lot of talk in media, in food magazines, in online, in the reviews of the product, don't even mention the quality of the protein that's used in the product. So I think it's a great task, for all the professionals, for the whole industry, to kind of make people aware that they need to consume a quality protein when they go and spend their money on an alternative protein. And you have a great question, because there is no straight answer of how to actually go about that. So it's more, right now, it's more about a personal responsibility of the product developers to deliver a high quality protein. Right now, you can't put, in US, you cannot put the label high PDCAS score or PDCAS score of 1. Nobody, this is not allowed. You cannot put statements like that. However, through these media outlets, you can let people know, through professional organizations and talking with your consumers directly. If you are business to business, you can communicate that. This is an important task.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that response. I don't see any other question coming in. So last call for questions if anybody has. And before we kind of close down, let me once again thank everybody who joined us today, Om, Dennis, Pratima, and Benjamin, for sharing your insights and interacting with our phase 3 cohort. All of these teams are going to go into phase 4. Top 20 teams, in fact, present on the World Protein Day at a demo day to a lot of our partners and other stakeholders, investors in our community. So Griffith Foods was obviously one of our key sponsors for the Smart Protein Summit, and Big Idea Ventures is one of our smart protein ecosystem partners on the India Smart Protein Innovation Challenge. Hopefully you'll be able to interact with their representatives in the demo day as well, and connect with Benjamin and others as you kind of go on your journey of building products, and perhaps hopefully also get many of you apply to their cohorts and get selected in their cohorts as well. Okay, I have a question coming in. So Hubert, I'm gonna promote you to ask your question so that you can just shed some more light on it. Hubert, can you ask? Yeah.
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yes.
Well, sir, may I know what are the criteria? Well, I'm CEO of Zero Meat. We are a budding plant-based meat startup, and we are based out of Tamil Nadu, south of India. Well, my question is, what are the criteria that are needed to be considered while making up the basic product profile? Other than the regular protein and fat and stuff, what are the criteria that should be considered while considering those raw material profile?
So could you perhaps just elaborate a little bit on the criteria? So other than you said protein or protein content or functionality of fat and its functionality considerations, what other parameters should one look at while choosing plant-based ingredients for product development? Is that your question?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Who would like to answer that?
I could start if you don't mind, but culinary is important. You know, how your product tastes like, what's the acceptability. You do want to run your prototypes by some kind of consumer panel. You do want to get a consumer feedback as soon as possible. Unless you develop for a particular customer, then you want them to get the consumer feedback as soon as possible. Now, formulation considerations. A lot of that depends whom you're formulating for. If you're formulating for food service, you don't really care about ingredient statement. Nobody's going to look at it really. If you're formulating for retail, then end consumer at the store will care what is on the ingredient statement. People who pay money for these alternatives and people who eat meat alternatives, they do care about what goes into them. They will look at the ingredient statement. Now you have to see, you have to know how different ingredients are labeled in your area. They're different. Country to country, the rules for labeling food ingredients are different. You don't want to end up with something really ugly on your ingredient statement. That will kill the product. And then I think Ben wanted to add as well to this. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Did I raise my hand or something? I didn't mean to jump in. Sorry.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry, I thought you were gonna add on the culinary aspect. Well, it's, other things like shelf life. Is your product can it be shelf life? It's a shelf life of flavor as well as shelf life safety. You know, microbiological shelf life of the product. You know, safety, food safety is important. However, how is the product is going to survive the storage and transportation is very important, because a lot of these products are sold frozen, and even those that sold fresh in the store usually distributed frozen, then defrosted and sold fresh, either at the restaurant or the store. Majority of the food service is manufactured, frozen, shipped, and then reconstituted at the QSRs and then served to the customers. So you have to consider how your product is going to perform during the storage and transportation. A lot of plant proteins differ from real proteins in their water holding ability. So that means that while you're storing the product frozen, and if the storage temperature kind of varies, and if you didn't use a lot of help to hold on to that water, you're actually going to lose a lot of water. A lot of frozen products that you buy, alternative proteins, have ice buildup in the bag. When you buy these nuggets, these veggie nuggets at the store, you sometimes see a lot of ice in there. That is because that is the water that the product lost during the storage. That significantly impacts not only the texture, but also the flavor of the product. A lot of them taste really unacceptable because they lost a lot of moisture. So that's a very important thing to consider.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that. It's a great point, especially when talking about water content. When you're talking about things going from frozen to fresh and back and forth and having control over that, when water freezes, obviously it changes dramatically and can change the product dramatically. And you know, in terms of the cold chain, when you're actually doing, when you're considering your product from when you manufacture it to when, you know, somebody opens the bag and, you know, pulls out your product. I think that for those of us that cook these products a lot, a consideration in water content is extremely important, especially as a chef. When you go to cook something that has ice and flakes of ice all over it, that means that you're not going to be able to get a good sear on that product, because the first thing that's going to happen is the water is going to melt, and then that's going to lower the contact heat, which is going to create sticking. And for breaded products as well, your breading comes off and it's just a nightmare. So, and also when you're searing these things in a pan, you need to get your oil very hot to get a nice sear on it and to prevent them from sticking. And as soon as you introduce water to that, then you have the oil popping, because hot oil and water obviously is not a good combination. So really taking considerations on your cold chain and also your formulations, if you're going from fresh and frozen, and hopefully not back and forth, can really change the cookability of the product as well.
Thank you. Om or Pratima, anything to add here other than what we've already extensively covered between Dennis and Benjamin?
No, I think they have shared fantastic information. Nothing to add.
Great. Last questions from Indra. This will be a last question before we close down the webinar. So Indra, do you want to quickly ask your question? Hi, Indra.
Hello.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Go on. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. So that was a great presentation. Thank you, Benjamin and guys from Griffith. So my question is, so we are working on plant-based ingredients, and the native proteins have a different functionality, and the processed ones, like the pre-treated ones, have we can modify the functionality using that. So there are numerous treatments like ultrasonication and so on. So I want to like kind of know, is there any focus point, specific focus point that one should keep in mind and target first? Since there are so many, I'd like to know your inputs here.
So basically pre-treatment and, pre-processing treatments that one could think about to increase the protein functionality and quality is kind of the overlying question. I guess anybody who would like to answer that.
You know what? Let me quickly touch on that. There are two things. When you process the grain and you actually need to extract the protein from the grain, let's say you're working with chickpeas, and you have a dry chickpeas and you mill them, and then you want to separate your protein and starch and fiber. When you do this process, there are parameters like temperature, and if you're doing a liquid, a wet separation, you can use different techniques. You can use the pH modification, you can use the salinity modification. You end up with the different products. So when you work with companies that have that sell you protein isolates, not all protein isolates and concentrates taste the same, and they don't have same functionality. That is because they're using different isolation techniques. They use different parameters. Some companies go for price and yield. Some companies go for functionality and clean taste. You have to make that decision early on. Your second option to increase functionality and improve the taste is to go to fermenters. There are companies out there, a lot of startup companies and more established ones, like Mycotechnology, for example, that use mycelia to ferment the proteins and to increase their functionality and to improve the taste. You can actually opt out for some of this solution where you can take a real low quality, I mean, really bad flavor protein, something like lentil. You take the lentil protein that is really strong and not a very functional protein. You can increase functionality through the fermentation. You can work with companies that can deliver that solution. It adds costs, but you end up with the product that is much more functional. Also, you have to consider the right manufacturers of the extruders. For example, you can work with somebody who will provide a very cheap solution for you, like a $60,000 extruder made in China that will just do that. Or you can spend more money and get a machine that actually will give you the end product that is way more functional and that will increase the functionality of protein while you're trying to make the end product. So there are those three ways to increase functionality from the plant protein.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dennis. And in the interest of time, I'm going to have to stop the number of questions that we have come in. But I think super interesting session. Once again, just thanking all of you who joined us today, attendees and speakers. And I think this recording would be very valuable for the larger smart protein ecosystem in our country, and they can connect with Griffith. They can apply, obviously, to BIV, all the entrepreneurs here in the house. And this also, in general, gives a lot of areas which we haven't previously discussed in our webinar and other podcasts and other standing materials where we have touched upon culinary aspects about channels of distribution. So really glad we could do that today. Having said that, I'll close down this webinar, and really thankful for all of you who have joined us today. Have a great evening. If there are any parting thoughts, maybe a line each from all of you, starting with Benjamin.
Sure. Yeah, my parting would be just really focus on your product. And if you have a great product, everything else will come together.
Thank you. Om?
I would say echo with what Benjamin says, that whatever tastes good, whatever texture is good, go for it, and the market will come to you.
Great. Dennis?
I want to close with this suggestion. Try to learn more about processing as much as you can. Work with the great manufacturers of the equipment. Go to the plants. Work with your partners to understand the process. The more you understand the process from very beginning, from the grain itself, from the legume, all the way down to finished product, the more successful you're going to be in the market.
Absolutely. Before we go on to Pratima, just adding on to that advice, right? A lot of you are thinking, okay, we are not really working with products. Maybe we are very early stage. So I think what we are really looking for in the proposals that you submit as part of phase 3 is, have you done that homework? Have you spoken to ingredient companies? Have you spoken to equipment manufacturers? And they are limited, right? In a country like India. So you have to really make sure that you have that are involved in your business, primary stakeholders, secondary stakeholders, people who are ultimately going to be your consumers. And is that kind of thinking, validated, data-backed thinking, experiential thinking, reflecting in your proposal is what kind of the judges are really looking at. Having said that, Pratima, any last thoughts before we close down the session?
Very well said, Shardul. I would just like to wish everyone a good luck, because there are a lot of entrepreneurs and young scientists or students here. So all the best, and yeah, let's see.
Perfect. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you.